Hi, I'm Nancy, and this is my Detroit. If you're anything like me, you've gone a little bit stir-crazy after being cooped up in your house for the last few months. But you might not be quite ready to come down to Detroit to look at the sights, or even better, take a nice guided tour with some of our great guided tour companies. So that's where I come in. I want to take you on these videos and show you the culture, the history, the architecture, and even a couple of restaurants you might want to visit once you're out and about again. So come with me and see my Detroit. I wanted to have my first video right here on the Detroit River because this is where Detroit began. In 1701, Antoine Cadillac beached his canoe about a half a mile south of here and claimed this area for the country of France. So after the Native Americans who were here first, this area first was French, then British, then United States, then back to British, and then finally back to the United States at the end of 1812. And the river and the city were named Detroit because the French considered this river a strait, which is a narrow body of water connecting two larger bodies of water. And the word in French for strait is détroit. We've messed up with the name a little bit, but now we do call it Detroit, is where it came from. And the river itself is 32 miles long. It starts at Lake Erie, goes all the way up to Lake St. Clair. And across the river is Canada. As with any international border, really good stories go with it. And the story I'm going to talk about is the story of Prohibition in this area. With Prohibition came the realization that you couldn't buy liquor, you couldn't sell liquor, and you couldn't drink liquor. But over there in Canada, you could buy it, sell it, and drink it. So with that type of a limitation, what comes along? Organized crime. And gangs and mobsters. And one of the main mobsters that were in these area, the group was called the Purple Gang. The Purple Gang controlled liquor smuggling here in the area almost completely, although there were a few other places that did it as well. 75% of liquor smuggled into the United States during Prohibition happened right here. And the Purple Gang was so good at it that Al Capone actually hired them to get supply for him. And they smuggled it in a lot of interesting ways. I mean, there's the usual stuff where they would, take a boat and bring it across, in the dead of night. And there would be where the river froze over and they would walk across. But some other stories are better. They're more interesting. One of them involves Belle Isle, which is a beautiful park island up the river that way. And what would happen is there's a narrow channel between Canada and Belle Isle, and so they would bring the liquor over either on small boats or they'd even put it on a barge and bring it across with some ropes. And then there's a bridge on the other side that connects to the mainland, and they just bring it across that. But sometimes the police would be on to them, and they would have to hide it. So they'd hide all this liquor on Belle Isle. And then a lot of people would come over, like for a picnic or something like that, and they would be able to go get the liquor and then bring it across the bridge later. One way they would do this is the women would take their bottles of liquor and put it in their boots and bring it across hidden that way. Thus the name bootlegger. Another really good story involves the Ambassador Bridge, which is just over there that you can see. What would happen there is that there were a lot of trucks coming over with loads of groceries and all sorts of different things. And so what they would do is they would take cartons of eggs and they would siphon the eggs out of the shells and then refill the eggs with liquor and just pile them all into the truck and bring them over. Interesting stories from an interesting time. One of my most favorite things to do down here on the river is to pull up a bench and watch the freighters go by. Lots of freighters go up and down this river. We call them lakers because they only sail on the Great Lakes. They can start off in the St. Lawrence Seaway and they'll go all the way up to Duluth in Minnesota. They're big ships. They're between 600 and 1,000 feet long, and they carry cargo such as taconite, which are iron ore pellets, calcite, which are rocks, and coal. And they come right down this river. One of the most famous lakers that you probably heard of is the Edmund Fitzgerald. Back in November in 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald was finishing up its season hauling taconite down from Superior, Wisconsin to the Rouge factory right down there. And it ran into a terrible storm on Lake Superior and it sank. One of the things that most people don't know about is there was another ship right beside it called the Arthur Anderson. And the Arthur Anderson made it to Whitefish Bay. And that ship still sails these waters today. If you sit here long enough, you will see that ship. And if we're lucky, we might see one today. We're walking along the Detroit Riverwalk. It's a 6-mile stretch of space along the river for walking and biking and just kind of enjoying the scenery. But it wasn't always like this. There used to be warehouses, docks, everything for commerce, but not a whole lot for people. So in the mid-70s, the city of Detroit and Henry Ford II decided to do a revitalization project, which opened this up to the people of Detroit to see the river and walk around it. There were a couple of other things that were part of that as well. One of them is the Renaissance Center and Hart Plaza. You know, that's a really tall building. Don't you think that's a really tall building? Welcome to the Renaissance Center. The Renaissance Center was built as part of the Riverfront revitalization back in the 1970s. That middle tower is the Marriott Hotel, and it's 73 stories high, which makes it the tallest building in the city of Detroit. It's surrounded by 4 office buildings that are each 39 stories high. And the architect was a man named John Portman, who was from Atlanta. So if you're from Atlanta, this building looks very similar to his building called Peachtree Plaza downtown. In the 1980s, during the 1980 Republican Convention, a lot of very famous people stayed at this hotel. A couple of them were Ronald Reagan and President Gerald Ford. In the 1990s, GM decided it wanted to buy this building for its headquarters, and it's been its headquarters ever since. It was pretty dark inside this building, and so they wanted to lighten it up. So they built this beautiful 5-story winter garden where you can sit and have coffee or lunch and enjoy the view of the river. Hi, I'm here with my friend Antoine Cadillac at approximately the place that he pulled up his canoe in this area in 1701. He was sent here by King Louis XIV and Minister of Marine Pontchartrain to form a settlement, build a fort, and carry on trade with the local Native Americans of the area in furs, which were really big at the time. He stayed here for about 3 years, and his wife even came over to join him. And then the French government transferred him down to New Orleans to work there. He never returned to this area again. This is Mariners Church. It's an independent Anglican congregation, and it's located on Jefferson Avenue, sandwiched between the Renaissance Center and Hart Plaza. It's known for its beautiful stained glass windows on the inside, but it's better known for the song for the Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot. This is where a service is held every year to commemorate the men of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And the song goes like this. In a musty old hall in Detroit they prayed, in the Maritime Sailors Cathedral. The church bell chimed till it rang 29 times for each man on the Edmund Fitzgerald. That service is still held today on the closest Sunday to the sinking on November 10th of the ship back in 1975. And now they hold a service for all of the sailors that sail the Great Lakes. This is the Gateway to Freedom Monument at the foot of the Detroit River, and it commemorates Detroit's role in the Underground Railroad. Up until about 1850, slaves could go to freedom within the United States just north of the Mason-Dixon line, which is about where the Ohio River is today. But when the Fugitive Slave Act came into being in the 1850s, it meant now they had to leave the United States, and Canada was a place for freedom for them. Between 20 and 30,000 slaves crossed over to freedom at this exact spot. We're on the river side of the monument now, as the slaves look across the river to freedom on the other side in Canada. There were many organizations in the Detroit area that helped the slaves escape. They kept them in their homes, they kept them in their churches, and one of those churches was the Second Baptist Church, which is in Greektown, that is still there today. They not only provided lodging, food, and shelter for these folks, they also were able to buy a boat for them to help ferry them across the river during the nighttime hours. As you can see here, the slaves came from many different places from the south, all the way up to here to get across the river. And some of the names of the people who actually ran the Underground Railroad are also listed on this monument. This is Hart Plaza. It's another part of the river revitalization project that was done back in the 70s. And it's right at the base of Woodburn Avenue, which is the main drag of Detroit. It's also right on the river. It was named after Senator Philip Hart, who was a Lieutenant Governor of Michigan and also a senator in Washington for the state of Michigan. He's known as a veteran. He was actually part of the Utah Beach invasion on D-Day, but he's also very well known for his civil rights activism when he was in the Senate. And if you go to Washington, D.C., the Senate office building, which is right to the side of the Capitol, is named after him. Here you can see the Dodge Fountain. The Dodge Fountain was built by Iziro Namaguchi. He was the architect. And on a day when the water is running, you'll see the water coming right down from the top, and it makes a really cool sprinkler system on a hot day for little kids who like to walk around in the water. Hey, thanks for joining me today as we explored the Detroit riverfront. Join me again as we see my Detroit.